couple of these. Let's just start off hanging out with the chat, then we'll get into free agency talk. Okay, Chris N says, it seems this Gannon D needs more pass rushers. I hate the idea of being so reliant on Parsons the first season after the injury. We all know it's usually until the second season back from ACL to hit. I think it's a fair point, Chris. I think that's a good observation too, man, because when you look at what Gannon wants to do, he wants to get pressure with 4, right? And I know that's going to tick a lot of people off, but at the same time, there's some give and take there. I know the worry is, well, crap, we got to be able to hit home with 4. We better have good pass rushers. We better get somebody alongside Micah Parsons. When you think about, okay, who would you like to bring in? What's the name that comes to mind? Let's say free agency, right? Like who's the edge defender you would like to bring in? Because when I hear pass rusher, I think edge defenders. Obviously, a 3-tech would be huge. You can go out and try to get the best pass rushing 3-tech. I think that would be a good idea. Now, who is that? Is it Logan Hall? Is it going to be David Onyemata? Is it going to be Calais Campbell? Is it going to be Levi Ozarike? Who would it be? Many people say Khalil Mack. Go get me Khalil Mack, right? Here's a fun stat for you guys. I know, and I'm not saying Chris is doing, I'm not saying anybody in particular, but you guys know, if you're on social media or you're in the chat sometimes or any, Facebook, Lord knows it's happening on Facebook. Everyone loves to kind of rake Gary over the coals, right? The reality is Rashan Gary last year had 12.1% pressure rate, right? With 7.5 sacks. Khalil Mack had 13.1 with 5.5 sacks. Khalil Mack couldn't stay healthy. I think he played in 12 games, right? So they had almost the same exact pressure percentage, just about 1% different there, right? And then when you take into the run stop consideration, Rashan Gary finished with 34 run stops. He led our team. Him and Kobe Wooden led our team in run stops, depending on which website you look at. Khalil Mack only had 26. So if you go and get someone like Khalil Mack thinking you're fixing your pass rush problem or you're adding a more consistent pass rush to it, expect 2 things realistically. He's going to play far fewer snaps than Rashan Gary because he couldn't stay healthy. Theoretically speaking, of course, this may be the healthiest he's ever been in his career. I get that, right? But expect two less sacks and a little bit more quarterback pressure percentage, but far fewer run stops. So when you look at those as a whole, right, what you're essentially saying is expect your run defense to get worse, get a little bit more pressure on the quarterback, but not get as many sacks, right? And that's just simply looking at the numbers. I like to remove names. I could have teed that up and said, which one would you rather have? And I think everybody would have said, give me the guy with 7.5 sacks and 34 run stops, right? And Chris didn't specifically mention Khalil Mack. That's just a name that gets tossed around, right? That's one of many names that gets tossed around. Now, listen, there's a Myles Garrett out there. He wants to come play for the Packers. That's a whole different ballgame, right? Max Crosby, if he was available and he wanted to come play for the Packers, that would make a lot of sense. Not cap-wise, right? That's the other thing when you're modeling your roster out. You got to make sure that you got enough money at each position or each position group. You don't want to model a roster where we're paying 3 edge defenders top 10 edge money, and now you can't afford anything else across your team. You got a backup caliber quarterback because you paid all that money to pass rushers, right? So we've kind of spent our money on Micah Parsons. We can now free up money if you move on from Gary, but with the caveat that your run defense is going to get significantly worse without Rashan Gary, right? The other thing to take into consideration, people say Enigbare. Enigbare is better than Gary. He played better than Gary. That's not true. It's simply not true. Enigbare, again, if I were to ask you which player would you rather have 12.1% pressure rate or 10.4? You'd say 12.1. Well, you just picked Rashan Gary. If I were to say, would you rather have 7.5 sacks or 2 sacks? You would say 7.5 sacks. Well, you just picked Rashan Gary. If I said, would you rather have 34 run stops or 25 run stops? You'd say 34 run stops. You just picked Rashan Gary. So again, when you remove the name and you remove all the hype and the buzz on social media where people just absolutely hate this guy, it's not necessarily the best move, right? So back to what Chris said with pass rushers, for me, yeah, if you could find a pass rusher just hanging out there somewhere, we could sign him for a decent contract. Go get him. If you're talking about moving on from Rashan Gary and investing a significant amount of money into going and getting Khalil Mack, I just can't justify that because I think there's more of a chance that you can get Rashan Gary to restructure his deal, take a pay cut, and keep him for less than what Mack would take on the open market. And again, we'll see what max market look like. It may hit rock bottom this year. That could happen, right? So it's just it's interesting to kind of see how everything kind of falls into place there. He Solder says, and there was no reason to keep Jenkins. Not sure what you mean by that. I don't know if that was a question or if that was just kind of, it looks like a comment. So we'll read it as it's written. And there was no reason to keep Jenkins. I agree. If the comment is, yeah, why would you keep Elton Jenkins on this team? I completely agree, Soder. This isn't, some people think moving back to left guard, he was way better there. That's not true. He has declined for the last several years, right? That's something that's continuously happened. He signed I don't remember when he signed his deal. His best year, I think, was 2021. He has declined every year since 2021, and injuries have kind of piled up. I think it is time to move on from Elton Jenkins. However, if Elton Jenkins is willing to take a sweetheart of a deal, or if he was to go test the market and the market ain't there and we can get him at $7 million, $8 million, I'd love to have Elton Jenkins back. Because again, Elton Jenkins playing center for you, right? 19th in pressure percentage at that price, to me, is worth having him on the roster. And then if you find somebody better in the draft, you've kind of covered all bases, right? And maybe you do slide him back to guard or what have you. The goal is to get the best five out there without moving guys crazily out of position, right? So I think that's a great point. So Brambo says, my theory is most of them decisions have been made, which is why Rich is walking. Yeah, could be. I wonder, when he stepped down, when Rich stepped down, I immediately thought, ooh, I wonder if they told Keyshawn he's not coming back. And that decision had been made, right? But then Keyshawn tweeted out a broken heart emoji, like he was sad that Rich Bisaccia wasn't returning. So that immediately made me think, well, maybe Keyshawn is going to be on the team. And it's like, dang, it sucks he's not going to be here with us anymore. Of course, it could just be a very general comment too, like, man, hey, this sucks. Going to miss him, but we're both going to different places too. Could be the case as well, right? And again, this is that time of year where there's not a whole lot going on. So we're reading in between tweets. We're trying to decipher this and that and the third. Things get really, really interesting there too. Obviously, you can kind of paint any picture you wanted to at this moment, right? Especially with it being lying season, I should say. Chris says, we need a veteran 3-tech, Clayton, in my opinion. Completely agree. I'm not sold that Wyatt is the guy. This may be the year he sells us, Chris. But boy, oh boy, if we go out there going, it's going to be the guy, we can't be mad when we're disappointed, right? Now, when you look at 3-techs, again, like Bill Belichick said, 3-techs aren't growing on trees. Everybody thinks they got a 3-tech. Very few teams do. Many people, I think, within the organization think that we've got our 3-tech in Devonte Wyatt. I mean, yeah, he's a good pass rusher, no doubt about it. What are you going to do about run stopping? His run defense has been pretty darn bad. So that's the big issue there. Now, when you look at the defensive tackles we liked in free agency, you got a Calais Campbell, you got a David Onyemata, you got a Levi Ozarike, if I'm saying it right, and then you got Logan Hall. Logan Hall is kind of an ascending player, although I think we would agree he hasn't lived up to that second-round talent. If his market value is down around the $5 to $8 million range, that'd be a great signing. If that market value has changed, and I haven't checked it lately, and it adjusts, and all of a sudden you got to pay him $10 million, me no likey that, right? So that's a very interesting one as well. So we'll see what his market is, and you usually get a good idea on day one. If there's a lot of rumors, this team, and this team is interested in Logan Hall, then you go, okay, the market's going to be pretty heavy, right? Obviously, low supply, high demand is going to spike a cost increase, right? So if that happens with Logan Hall, you could go get a veteran like David Onyemata. You could go get a veteran like Calais Campbell, and immediately people will say, Calais Campbell's a nose. He's not just a nose. That's a guy that doesn't come off the field. He plays all three downs. He will kick over to 3-tech. He'll play a little 5. He can play a 4-eye. Now, can he play it like he did when he was 28? Probably not. The dude's damn near 40 years old, but he continues to play good ball. That's when you have these conversations. I'm glad Chris brought this up. When you have these conversations, for me, the problem is if it's easy for me to convince myself that we would be just as good at 3-tech with David Onyemata or maybe a Calais Campbell kicking over there in the nickel or a Logan Hall, what's that really say about Devonte Wyatt? And again, that's a guy that we spent a first-round pick on. He's got a $12 million cap hit this year, fully guaranteed. Will he be completely healthy? by the start of the season. Will he continue to stay healthy? That's been the big MO there, is he's not been able to crack, 400 snaps. I think people have been, that's kind of, seems like the number people mention is 400 snaps is what you can get out of him, right? So it's tough, man. It's tough. So, yeah. Let's see here. Let's hit this one real quick. This is what I'm talking about. Soder says, and Gary had pursuit speed that could have been timed by watching molasses flow in January. If his pursuit speed is so bad, how did he have so many run stops? Let's say that's true, and his pursuit speed is bad. And see, the popular thing on social media is they have grabbed one clip of two defenders chasing a quarterback to the sideline. Gary is behind the first defender. The first defender's full sprint, and as he closes in on the sideline, Gary kind of pulls up, right? If his pursuit speed is so bad, and he still had more run stops than Khalil Mack and Enigbare, I imagine you would think Enigbare's pursuit speed isn't bad, right? Then how did Gary have 34 run stops to Enigbare's 25? How did Gary, if Gary is so slow at getting to the quarterback, how did he have a 12.1% pressure rate, but Enigbare only had 10.4? Now, if the answer to the question, the comment, however you want to word it, is let's kick Gary inside, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you get Gary back and you restructure that deal and you let him rotate at 3-tech with Devonte Wyatt, I really like that idea, because Gary does play with power. And Gary's superpower has never been he's a blazing speed, open field runner, right? It's very rare you need that anyway. You need that quick burst, and you need that power at the point of attack. This time of year, people get very, very, very excited about 40 time, right? And quickness when it comes to pass rushing. And you guys know one of the guys that I trust the most in NFL draft analysis is Greg Cosell. Greg Cosell talks about it all the time. And he's like, you have to be able to rush with power at the NFL level. If you can only rush with speed, you're not going to make it. Like, people immediately, their argument will probably go to, well, Micah Parsons rushes with speed. He does. But you've also seen him blow up and run straight through a double team block with pure power. He's a freak of nature, right? And hopefully he keeps that. He continues that after the ACL. But you got to be able to rush with power. And that's what Gary does. And lo and behold, there's two of them, right? That came out of Michigan at the same time. I'll never forget this. You had Rashan Gary and you had Chase Winovich. And many people said, okay, they're both going to be edge defenders. That's kind of what they were projected at, because Rashan Gary's RAS, he was a freak. Like he had a good 40 time. It was great measurables across the board. We could pull it. I'm sure you'd probably be surprised. Chase Winovich on the opposite side, right? So they were both considered edge defenders. And PFF put a tweet out. You can still find it to this day. If you go to PFF, just their Twitter account, unless they deleted it now, and you just search, hit the search bar at the top, and you type in Rashan Gary, Chase Winovich, it'll probably pop up. They said Rashan Gary was going to be a bust and Chase Winovich was going to be the better player. Chase Winovich hasn't been in the league, to the best of my knowledge, for a while now. He didn't last hardly any time with the New England Patriots, and he may have played for another team. He may be on a backup role somewhere too. But again, why did I see that tweet and laugh at it? Because obviously PFF didn't go watch the tape. When you go and watch the tape, you've seen Rashan Gary playing a 3-tech inside and playing with power. Again, go back to what Greg Cosell says. You got to be able to rush with power at the NFL level. You got to. So now, if you've got quickness and power, that's great. Think about LVN. Would anybody say that LVN has lived up to his first round expectations? I don't think many Packer fans would say, oh, yeah, absolutely. He's played like a first rounder. I think we've seen progression. And this year, I really feel good about him taking another step, which maybe even be a more of a reason to either move Rashan Gary to 3-tech or just go ahead and cut him outright. But the big thing with him was that 40 time, if I remember correctly, how agile and quick he was for a big guy, right? And then he gets to the league and he didn't just run away with a starting position, a starting roster spot, right? Why is that? We expected him to be powerful, right? The combine suggested he's going to have so much brute strength it's not even funny. But again, does he play with power? Does he play with power on Sundays? And on Sundays, it's a lot different than college, right? So that's one thing I will say about what the way Greg Cosell looks at the pass rushers is a good starting point like when you look at some of these pass rushers, is do they rush with power? You want to know why he said last year Walter Nolan was the best defensive tackle in the draft when there was nobody else saying Walter Nolan was going to be the best defensive tackle. There was like some people have Walter Nolan 5 and 6 on their list, prominent people, like people that know what they're doing too, right? But his main thing was this is the best defensive lineman in this draft, and he rushes with power. You've got to be able to rush with power, and that's exactly what the same MO for Jalen Carter was as well. That's why I look at our boy Peter Woods, and I'm a little bit like people are comparing him to Jalen Carter this year, and I don't see it. I mean, they're both 6'3" and they both weigh about the same. Yeah, I mean, we could find 50 players in the draft that look like 50 players in the league. It doesn't mean they're going to play like them, like stylistically, and also in terms of deployment within their college programs. How were they used? That stuff matters too, right? It does. So Mike Witt with Super Chat. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you, buddy. He says, the more I think about it, I think we're going to bring Kenny home after Jerry cuts him. A defensive line of Micah, Wyatt, Kenny, LVN, Sorrell, and Oliver. I think we cut Gary. Just a gut feeling. I could see that happening with cutting Gary. And again, I want to be very clear. I do not want Gary back this year at the what's the cap hit here? $28 million cap hit this year. Everything that's been said about Gary the last 2 and 3 years, this is the year it should be being said, because the cap number finally got to the point where it's like, okay, now this is unreasonable. The fact that he led your team in pressures, sacks, and run stops until Micah got here, tells me that those lower cap hit numbers were well worth the money. Well, now it's time to move on. And that's where you got to tip your cap to Goody. He protected himself. Now, you're only going to free up $11 million if you cut him, but I think we would all agree, if you feel better about Micah, Wyatt, Kenny, LVN, Sorrell, and Oliver, if you do go out and try to get a Kenny Clark, if that's the case, then give me the $11 million, right? But if you're telling me that LVN is going to finish, and I should have looked that up. Actually, I think I've got it right here. Let's take a quick look here. I won't put it on the screen, but I'll read it to you guys and gals. LVN finished at 11.2%. Okay. Gary was 12.1%. So if you're telling me those numbers are going to switch this year, and like, let's say Gary continues to decline and gets down to around 10 to 11% pressure, and LVN jumps up to the 12 or 13%, absolutely. Cut Gary, free up the $11 million. LVN's the guy moving forward. I think that's probably the plan, to be honest with you, Mike. That's what would make the most sense to me, for sure. And I'd be on board with it, man. I think that'd be awesome. So, appreciate the super chat, pal. And as far as Kenny, it depends on the price. Kenny played pretty good ball last year for Dallas. He's going to be asked to do something totally different with Jonathan Gannon, obviously, and how he kind of, sees everything, right? Defensively, I guess you could say. So appreciate the super chat, Mike. Got one more here from Mike. He says, with Jacobs getting older, Lloyd always hurt. My hot take, running back is a sneaky need for the Packers in the draft. Thoughts on my hot take, Clayton? This is what Jacob brung up the other day, and we've been diving into it pretty extensively. Here's the problem with that, Mike. If you could tell me Lloyd's going to be hurt again this year, it makes all the sense in the world. But what if you go out and you spend the 52nd pick? And to be clear, Mike did not say spend the 52nd pick, right? He did not say that. But if you go out and you spend the 52nd pick on a running back and Marshawn Lloyd's completely healthy, and that 52nd overall pick sits on the bench all year long because it's going to be Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd, it's kind of a wasted pick for a Super Bowl window year, right? We're in year 2 of 3 here. Now, if you're saying, hey, get me a solid back at like pick 120 or later, I'm all about it. And I think there's some backs late in this draft they're very interesting to me. We could pull up the board and highlight them, but obviously it's not kind of what we're talking about here. But it's one of those situations. How do you feel about Lloyd? And maybe Goody has to make that decision. Maybe he's already made that decision by getting the doctor's hands on Marshawn Lloyd and going, okay, we feel as good as we ever have about his health, or I'm still seeing some of the same issues. I don't think he'll hold up. Maybe that'll be the determining factor, right? But once again, you're talking about a 3rd round pick that Goody swung and missed on, and we were excited about it. Marshawn Lloyd, according to Daniel Jeremiah, was the best running back in the draft the year we took him. So that was a great pick. I don't want to sit here and play hindsight and go, oh, what was Goody thinking? No, injuries happen. But I know what we need to do is we got to start doing something extra and figuring out why these young guys are always hurt. There's something off. There's something really, really bad. It just seems like it's bitten us in the last 2 years way more than any other team, if that makes sense. So, all right, Mike, thank you so much, buddy, for the super. We appreciate you, man. If you guys are watching this video back later, let us know what you think about the pass rusher talk. How do you feel about Rashan Gary? Is it time to move on? Would you rather see him back at a pay cut? Would you just cut him outright, free up the 11 million? And here's the other thing too: you can go post June 1 and free up 19.5 million. You just got to carry that $28 million cap hit until June, and obviously that doesn't help you in free agency. So that might be a long-term decision that they make right out of the gate as well. Let us know in the comments what you think. Make sure you hit like for us, hit subscribe, click that bell icon. We would greatly appreciate it. All right, boys and girls, let's